Thank you, Dr. Harlan. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, that's more like it. As Dr. Harlan said, I'm David Dungan. I'm a practicing primary care physician specializing in internal medicine and pediatrics. I've been in practice for 32 years, and I'm going to be your MC today and tomorrow. So one thing I'm going to challenge our speakers with today is to share a fun fact about them that nobody might know. In fact, that might be a fun thing for all of you to do as you're networking, to share a fun personal fact that might be interesting or something that you think that people may not suspect or people may not know in terms of that. So for myself, my fun fact is that I've marched in a Rose Bowl parade twice, once with my high school and once with my college marching band. So sadly, my college has not been back to the Rose Bowl since then, but that's in a whole other discussion. So our first speaker today is Mr. Adante Hart. He's joining us from Oldways. He's currently based in Raleigh, North Carolina, where he teaches a taste of African heritage as a means of addressing the challenges in the food and nutrition health disparities in various cities that are with their underserved residents. He has more details on his biography on the Conference Health Meets Food webpage. He will be presenting today on the cultural diversity applications of the Mediterranean diet. And don't forget your fun fact. Adante.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Gosh. All right, it feels good to be here. Thank you, Dr. Harlan and staff, for inviting me and be able to speak on African heritage diet. It's a pleasure, something that I love to talk about, something that's near and dear to my heart, so I'm glad to be here with you all to talk about it. All right, let's get this show on the road. We're gonna be talking about highlighting cultural food traditions of African heritage diets. Disclosures, I work for Oldways. I've been an instructor for an African heritage diet program since 2013, so it's been quite some time. Here are the goals. We're gonna talk about the African heritage diet. Is there a laser here? There's not a laser here. What did I do? I don't think I was supposed to do that. Note to self, this is not a laser on this clicker for any speakers coming up. All right. There we go. Take two. So we'll talk about what the African heritage diet is, look at the key components, the foods, the flavors, some of the common cooking techniques that are a part of it. Also go over the evidence base for African heritage diets and look how we can integrate it into culinary medicine. And so yeah, so a little bit about me. I'm with Oldways as an outreach dietitian. Most of my work is in culinary and public health. I live in Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina. I used to live in Maryland. I actually did school up the street in Baltimore, and so it's always good to be back in the DMV. I don't get here as often as I want to, but when I'm here, I absolutely love it. And because I've been in the DMV for a while, slightly biased toward Ethiopian food. Anybody else here like Ethiopian food? A lot of hands. Yeah, I love to see that. And I'll talk about it in a little bit more detail. And I think I have to share a fun fact that no one know about me. I actually told one of my friends this week, and they were like so shocked. So as much as like I love culinary and food, I think I may have only watched one episode of Top Chef my entire life. People were like, "What, Adante? You like to cook? You haven't seen Top?" I'm like, I was always growing up watching like the instructional cooking shows, and never was really into the competitions. And so as growing up, I was like, "Yeah, this is cool." Like no disrespect to the people that are on the shows. Like I absolutely love and adore them, but just wasn't my cup of tea. So yeah, that's my fun fact. All right. Oh. Okay, so that's about me. About Oldways, our vision is really to promote healthier, happier food traditions through promoting cultural food traditions. We teach people to inspire the healthy, old ways of eating, so those sustainable, traditional ways of eating. And some of you may know us for the Mediterranean diet pyramid, some of the other heritage diet pyramids, and also the whole grain stamp. So show of hands, how many of you are familiar with either of those items? That's most of us. There's some that aren't, but hopefully after this presentation, you will be. And this is a picture of my favorite food, Ethiopian food. And I took this from a class that I did years ago at a farmer's market, and we actually made everything on the injera, except the injera itself, because that is a very labor-intensive process that I don't have the patience for. But I use this picture because I love this food because one, it brings so many people together. Because of the way it's prepared, you have to eat in groups. I mean, COVID kind of disrupted that a little bit, but we've kind of been getting back to that communal way of eating. And it just brings different people from different ways of life together. And also, the food is really good. There's a lot of plants on that piece of injera. There might be a little bit of chicken on there too, but so many foods and different flavors that I'm going to discuss in this talk. So that's why it's my favorite food. So, talking about African heritage diets. Before I even talk about the food aspect, I'll go into what is the African diaspora, because the diet is also the food of the diaspora. And so for those who aren't as familiar with these terms, diaspora simply means a scattering. And when I talk about the African diaspora, I'm talking about the scattering of people from the African continent through other parts of the world, in this discussion, mostly to South America and the US through this transatlantic slave trade. And so we think about the foods that have shaped the diet of people in the United States. We think about the continental Africa, meaning West and Central, for purposes of this discussion. We'll also look at the Caribbean, Latin America, and the American South. So we think about a traditional Southern diet. It has roots and influences in all these regions of the world. Okay, and so that's the diaspora. Then we look at this pyramid, all right? This is the African Heritage Diet Pyramid. It is a pictorial representation of the eating patterns of people across the African diaspora, so people from these various parts of the world. And so this isn't necessarily like your old school food pyramid that we might have grown up seeing, but it's really is a great way of showing the patterns of eating. So many times people ask, how can you say that everybody eats these particular foods? And my response to that is, well, this shows the patterns of eating. It doesn't mean that everybody from all these places eats this exact same way, but we do see patterns within how people eat. We see some commonalities, and so this pyramid highlights those commonalities. So if you look here, you see that at the bottom of that pyramid, we see greens. So greens make up the base of most meals across the African diaspora. And then you go up, you see things like tubers and healthy starches. You see the vegetables, the fruits, legumes, whole grains, seeds, and nuts. And as you move up, you'll also see that, I forgot, this is not a laser. This is not a laser. I like the point. But in the middle, you see herbs, spices. So those are ways that our foods are seasoned. And so the base is all those foods. And so we think about comparing that to, let's say, a My Plate or any other type of diet. We see that these are actually the helpful things that we promote to our patients and the people that we serve. So things like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, all these things that we serve. And this is part of the base of the diet, meaning that this makes up the majority of the diet of folks across the African diaspora. And then we move up the pyramid and we see certain things, having maybe a little less often. So we do see fish and seafood, poultry, oils, and we kind of say moderate to often. And then at the top of the pyramid, we have things that are eaten occasionally. It's a slice of sweet potato pie. I love sweet potato pie, but North Carolina, our state vegetable is a sweet potato. And I love sweet potato pie. And it's not most things that I eat every day or encourage people I work with to eat every day. But you know what? Every once in a while, you need a good little slice of sweet potato pie, whatever kind of pie you like. So this whole purpose is that no food is demonized in this diet. We promote that every food has a place in the diet, and when we're working with our patients, that's a point we should emphasize, that every food does have a place. Some foods we should be eating every day. Some foods we shouldn't be eating every day. But every food has a place. And then also on this pyramid, there's a couple other things I want to point out. On the left, we encourage drinking water, so encourage people to have water and kind of less of the sugar-sweetened beverages. And then at the bottom, enjoying a healthy lifestyle. So we see things like physical activity, spending time with friends and loved ones, eating together, and doing those non-diet things, those things that are associated with lifestyle medicine that impact our health. So this pyramid says a whole lot, and it's descriptive and not prescriptive when it comes to promoting health. All right, and so we also have at Oldways other pyramids that showcase what healthy eating could be modeled as, so not just African heritage, but also Latin American heritage, Asian heritage, and also we have a vegetarian diet pyramid, so you can check us out for more of those resources. But again, this is just showing that this isn't a prescriptive thing. This is showing patterns of eating across groups of people, and so this isn't just everyone eats the same way, but we're looking at what are the building blocks of the diets of these particular groups of people. So yes, this topic is on African heritage, but think about any any global cuisine or anybody across, the world, there are certain building blocks that groups have in common. So these pyramids exist to highlight what those building blocks are in those diets. Okay, this is another representation of that pyramid that you saw right there. And so while this is a great pictorial representation, working with different clients and patients, some people prefer a list. Some people say, hey, doc, I don't know what to eat. Just give me a list. I'm good, right? And so you give them this list, and again, this is the exact same thing that's on the pyramid, but just highlights many foods. There might be some that might not be on the list, but in general, these are the foods here. And you may have somebody that says, hey, this list is cool, but can you show me what it looks like? And so that's what this pyramid looks like. And then for others, I think I actually have it on the slide after this. For others, they may be like, hey, that list is a lot of words, that's a lot to read, like I'm probably not gonna do that. Or they show them the pyramid, it's like, all right, this is cool, but I don't know what to do. Show me what actually a plate looks like. And so that's what that is on the right-hand side. This is an example of a heritage plate. So I believe that's hoppinjon, which is black-eyed peas, peppers, tomatoes. You also have some greens, and I think it's a soup up there. Yeah, soup there, and it's also okra and tomatoes on the bottom. So it's a representation of what it could look like. It can look various ways, all right? But again, we think about the people we work with. People have different learning styles. People take information differently. So for some, that list might work. Others, you show them the pyramid that can help them kind of put together a meal. For others, showing them what it actually looks like. When we're in the teaching kitchen, teaching folks how to prepare a meal, that might be where that comes in handy at. So let's consider the different learning styles of the folks we're working with. Okay, and then we're going to talk about some common culinary techniques in African heritage diets. Now, by no means is this the exhaustive list of techniques, all right? I only have but so much time to talk today, so I wanted to distill it down to some of the most common ones that we promote in particular program. And so we see things like stewing. This is a groundnut stew that I prepare a number of times for a few conferences. This is a sweet potato stew with peanut butter, and it's flavored with spices like cinnamon, cayenne, and again, peanut butter is the base of that stew, so it's great for teaching folks how to use peanut butter in different ways. Braising meats and things in liquid is another technique that we cover. Also grilling. Grilling is also a great way, it's an alternative to frying certain foods, and roasting as well. Other techniques, we talk about steaming vegetables as opposed to cooking them in lots of oil and saturated fats. Also marinating foods to give them flavor as opposed to, just throwing salt on them. Simmering foods as well. And another one is fermentation. Fermentation, we know it's important because eating fermented foods helps with the gut microbiome. It helps, increase that gut microbiome diversity. And that first, one of the earlier slides that showed, the injera, that's actually made from fermented teff flour. All right, so you hydrate the teff flour, you let it ferment, and then you cook it. So injera is a fermented food. All right, and then what do these heritage plates actually look like? So I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with the standard American diet plate, characterized by, lots of fried foods, not a lot of color on there, maybe except for the iceberg lettuce on there. But a lot of fried foods, a lot of saturated fat, lots of sodium, and a lot of things that sugar-sweetened beverages and things that we as practitioners do not promote or encourage our people we work with to consume a lot of. So we don't consume a lot of those things. So that's standard American diet plate. But when we look at a healthy heritage plate, and this is particularly from the American South, this is what it can look like. All right, this is just but one example of what it looks like. And so this is actually something that I made at home. And so we see here, I've got some black-eyed peas, right? So we've got plant protein, we've got legumes, which again, high in fiber, good protein source. We've got collard greens, great source of fiber, vitamin K, and other vitamins. And that's going with cornbread, because you can't have collard greens without cornbread. It's got to sop up the pot liquor, right? So, you got to have that with that. And then I had a tomato, because, I had tomatoes at home, and I just cut it up, put a little salt and pepper, and that's a simple heritage plate. It doesn't have to be super complicated. Very simple. Many households typically eat that. And so this is also changing the narrative that to eat healthy means you have to eat a certain way. So for many people, these are the foods that they grew up on. These are the foods that their mom, their grandma, their great-grandma made, right? And so we're teaching that these foods have a place in the diet and they can confer health, right? And then we compare African heritage diets to standard American diet. We see very stark differences. So African heritage diet, primarily, it's plant-based, all right? So a lot of plants are promoted. You do see meat sometimes, but oftentimes those meats are used to flavor the dish, not necessarily be the main thing, but there could be a main source of meat. It's no problem with that. Promotes whole foods. It promotes those, again, those fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, all right? It's high in fiber, complex carbohydrates. We eat those things, they help with regularity, digestion, and may lower cholesterol. These diets are naturally low in sodium. We use different herbs and spices to flavor these foods. And then again, it's low in those saturated fats and refined sugars, compared to the standard American diet, which is pretty much the opposite. All right? And another point I want to make here is that, while we want to get everybody, as many people, kind of closer to this side, because we know the things on this side help, with better health and lead to better health outcomes, the reality is that there are a lot of people that are on that side of the diagram right now, and truthfully, many of them may not fully get on this side. There might be foods that they may not want to, let go of or stop eating, and you know what? That's okay. If we can get them from that side to the middle, maybe a little closer this way, that's still a win. So let's think about, we're not trying to fully transform everything about their diet, but if they can make some small changes here and there to get them closer to this side, I consider that a win. Right? And then this is the advisory committee that helped form the African Heritage Diet. It is full of dietitians, nutritionists, researchers, food historians, chefs, and culinarians. And they all came together and put their expertise together to really create this pyramid and some other things. And the point I want to make here is that we had always relied on subject matter experts to guide this project, to guide this creation of this diet. So, we may not have had all the answers in-house, but we did seek out those who had the answers and brought the minds together to do this. And so if you all are, doing anything related to heritage or this type of work, just remember, lean on those subject matter experts, because they have the expertise in these things and can help advise whatever it is that you're doing. And another point I want to make here, and just make sure I got my notes here. Another point I want to make here is that in addition to leaning on subject matter experts, again, I've told you kind of about these folks here, but also the people that in our communities that we serve, they are subject matter experts as well. So let's make sure they're included in this process. Whenever we're creating a curriculum or whatever program or intervention that we are running, make sure they're included, because they are subject matter experts. They know their communities better than we do. And also the patients that we work with, they are also subject matter experts in their own lived experience. So always keep that in mind when we're working with different people. We all have something to bring to the table. We all have some depth of knowledge that can help us reach our goals. All right. And so the committee came together, brought the information together, and formed the pyramid. We already talked about that pyramid. And so that information was further distilled into a curriculum, which I'll shift into talking about now after a drink of water. All right, so how do we put this information into practice? I've given you all this info about the foods, the flavors, the pyramid, where this all comes from. So how do we put it in practice? So I'll talk about a class that Oldways does called A Taste of African Heritage. There we go. And so this is one of our flagship programs that's been around since 2012. And it's broken up into 6 classes, all right? And so each class is roughly 90 minutes to 2 hours. This is something that I've been teaching since 2013, and so I've seen it in a lot of communities, taught in a number of settings, from churches to community centers to senior centers and research institutions. I've taught at public health departments, at farms, and across different age groups, from kids to older adults. And so the way it's set up, there's 6 lessons. The first one goes over herbs and spices, kind of building that base, teaching folks how to rely on herbs and spices to season their foods as opposed to high sodium foods. We also talk about the importance of acids and things to give foods flavor. So kind of really building that foundation for the future lessons. And then we talk about greens, the different types of greens out there, the flavors they have. And it's one of my favorite lessons, because I get to bring different greens into the class and have people try them raw so they can know, all right, this is what a collard green tastes like. This is what a mustard green tastes like. Why is this really spicy and peppery? We get to tell them why. This is what kale tastes like. This is why it's bitter. And so being able to try these different things and have these experiences. And for the kids, it's great because they get their hands on the food. They get to try different things and really get to taste things in their natural state. And then we go from greens to whole grains, talking about their importance, why we, encourage consumption of, not just brown rice, but other heritage whole grains. So things like millet, things like quinoa, things like sorghum and teff, those other grains that are out there that are just as healthy as brown rice. We also go into beans and rice because beans and rice, they are the foundation of pretty much every meal across the globe. Like every culture has a bean and rice based dish, and they're all really good. I haven't had them all, but trust me, the ones I have had, they're very tasty. And then we go into tubers and mashes. So looking at the health benefits of complex carbohydrates, those starches that like sweet potatoes and things that are mashed. And as I mentioned in the cooking techniques, we also look at mashing as a way of preparing meals. So, how many of you are familiar with what the food fufu? So some of us are. So for those that aren't, fufu is it's a starchy kind of like dough that's served with a lot of stews, mostly in like West and Central Africa, and it's made from either pounded yams, so really taking traditional yams and like really pounding it into like a paste, or sometimes it's done with plantain, or sometimes we get used, cornmeal is used to do it. It has a different name, but it's typically a pounded starch made into like a doughy-like texture to use to accompany different stews and it's also a vehicle for getting those stews in and a vehicle for increased vegetable consumption. So we look at tubers and mashes, and then the final lesson covers fruits, vegetables, healthy lifestyle. So, some people ask, well, why do you have fruits and vegetables at the end? Well, we know fruits and vegetables are part of a healthy diet, and they're kind of discussed across the other lessons, but this one really focuses on like where they fit into over a healthy lifestyle. And then, again, this is a 6-class series. It's done typically like once a week. Some groups can do it a little differently, maybe once every other week, depending on how they want it. And then each class, it consists of a lesson, it consists of an introduction, it consists of a nutrition component. So we look at like why these foods are important. We also look at historically where these foods fit in, how they're important, and why they are healthy. And then we do a hands-on cooking part, which is people's favorite part of the lesson. People get to actually like see these meals prepared, and it could either be done, one person instructing, or depending on the setup, you can do a hands-on style. It just depends on the setup and the resources you have. But I've done it and I've seen it done different ways. And then we also track certain parameters, certain metrics. So and participants can complete a lifestyle physical health evaluation. So a lot of questions around fruit and vegetable consumption, physical activity, drinking water, and also there's an optional blood pressure check and waist circumference check to get some of those other health metrics, but that's all voluntary. Yeah, that's it for A Taste of African Heritage. So that's how the classes are set up. And then I mentioned the fruits and vegetable healthy lifestyle, and I included this here because in one of the lessons, participants are encouraged to fill out this chart, and it's kind of has them kind of self-assess themselves in different areas, not just what they eat, but also things like spirituality, friendships, family, sleep, hobbies. And so this takes a more kind of a lifestyle medicine approach and looks at these various non-diet factors that are related to health, and really has people think about their health, and not just in terms of, all right, well, what am I eating or am I moving? So this really helps people look at health in a more holistic view, which is why I like this part of the program. All right, and so Taste of African Heritage has been taught in over 100 cities since 2012 when it started, and these numbers you see here, these are actually older. This is from our 10-year report from 2022, so these numbers are actually much higher than they are now. And so it's been taught all across. I don't think we have anyone doing it in Wyoming yet. So if you know anyone in Wyoming that wants to teach a class, please connect them with us. But the point I want to make is that it's been taught in different settings all across. Communities have loved this. People I've talked to, they tell me that a lot of people, some are even in tears when they talk about how seeing their own foods highlighted in something like this, seeing their own foods labeled as healthy and not demonized, it brings them joy, it gives them a sense of pride. And so I love seeing this because so many people are impacted by this program and just learning about their own foods, their own heritage, and also people who may not come from an African heritage background, that learning opportunity that they have to learn about, other types of foods that they may not have grown up with or may have been, accustomed to. And so, gone over what the diet is, I got over the class. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the evidence base for African heritage diets. And All right. So here's a few pieces of research that kind of promotes African heritage diets. And so there was one study, as from the first point, where people from South Africa were placed on an American-style diet. So, again, low fiber, high saturated fat, high in sodium, more sugar-sweetened beverages. And so they were placed on an American diet, and we saw that their gut microbiome actually reflected that, and it was actually less diverse. But when we saw African Americans placed on a traditional African diet, which consists of more fiber, less saturated fat, more fruits and vegetables, less sodium, we saw that their gut microbiome diversity increased, and we saw better biomarkers for those gut microbiota. And so it shows that, and this study, I think they switched diet for 2 weeks. So even after 2 weeks, we saw that change in their gut microbiome. So this is really important, showing that, these traditional foods can confer health. And then we've also have research showing that providing culturally appropriate interventions like these are, and featuring foods that are regularly enjoyed amongst a culture, can actually promote good nutrition in these communities. And so, and it's kind of common sense. You see something that includes your own foods, showing the healthfulness of your own foods. Well, you're probably going to eat more of those foods, right? So this is just research that's confirming that. And then we've seen that making culturally sensitive modifications to existing diet programs can lead to improvements in blood pressure and other health markers, right? And A Taste of African Heritage was actually the focus of a journal article. And so we actually have some results to show the impact of it. And so you can look this up on your own time, because I doubt anyone can read what's on there on this paper, but that's it right there. And one of the co-authors, Kelly, is also here. She'll be speaking right after me. But the results show that people who participate in this program, they increase their consumption of fruits and vegetables and whole grains. They also increase their physical activity, and they also lowered their waist circumference, their weight, and their blood pressures dropped by 1 to 2 stages. And nearly everyone that was participating in the class, they cited heritage as a motivator for their health. And what that means is that being able to recognize their own foods and heritage and seeing that promoted, and again seeing those things looked at in a positive light rather than a negative light, as many have probably heard before, it motivated them to want to continue consuming those foods and living a healthy lifestyle. And we also know that people who see more heritage promoted in their programs, and have that connection with their cultural heritage in this aspect, their outcomes are better. And also we've seen there's actually research showing that patient satisfaction is improved when they're participating in programs that center their heritage and their health. So this is a very important point, this last one. I mean, all of them are important, but I like that last point because, again, that's what keeps people engaged and keeps people in a program. So I've gone over some of the quantitative results. Here are some. Did I skip it? Let me try again. It might have froze, maybe. There we go. And so here's some testimonials from people who have participated in the Taste of African Heritage. I'm not going to read all these to you. You can see those for your own, but I want to say that most of them, we have people that show their excitement for the class. And where's one? This one in the middle. I really like this one because they said they've been interested in healthy eating, so they have some motivation to make change. There was an interest there, but they didn't really quite know how. And so hearing about this class and taking and being a part of it, they jump-started their life, and now they've made significant dietary changes that have impacted not just them, but the people around them. There are people that I've taught that have really taken this and ran with it to the point where they're teaching classes themselves. They change things. They might be the primary cook in their household, and so because they're participating in this, they've made changes that have impacted their whole family. And I even have somebody that at one of my first classes, she did 2 classes in. She actually came up to me a few months later and said that her doctor, not a few months, actually a year later, because that was the first class. Yeah, a year later, and she said that her doctor, took her off her diabetes medication because of the way her diet improved, and she was actually moving more, so she didn't need the medication. So there are a lot of positive testimonials about this class, and so I wish I can read all these to you, but just know that the evidence base is here, and also people who participate in it, they have had great things to say. All right, so then briefly I'll touch on how this fits into culinary medicine. I have a quote here that speaks to that, and it's from Chef Bryant Terry. He's a vegan chef and one of my favorite chefs to look up to. And so he says that culturally appropriate food is an important criteria for determining what is healthy, and people of African descent need not look any further than our own historical foodways for better well-being. It's vital that we incorporate African and African diasporic vegetables, grains, legumes, fruits, nuts, seeds, and cooking techniques into our kitchens. And so why is this important to culinary medicine? Well, we want to be able to, again, the people that we work with, make sure they see themselves in the lesson, see themselves in the food. And, again, the answer isn't in, isn't in a strict way of eating, but it is in the culinary diversity of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, those foods out there. And so whether it's, African heritage or wherever people are from, being able to highlight and see those foods and know the health benefits of those foods is very helpful for them. And so that's how we can integrate it into our program. So if we're doing lessons, in our teaching kitchen, making sure that we choose those ingredients that speak to different heritage, different cultures, as a way to teach folks that there are different foods that confer health all throughout the globe. And for some people, it might be introducing them to a food they never heard of, but may even love afterwards. So, here's some more quick tips. So again, we're going to research traditional foods and ingredients. So if it's something that you're not familiar with, we all have done research here. We all can do this. We can look up things. We can, talk to our friends who are chefs or culinarians and ask them, all right? And so if we already have curricula that are, that we have at our institutions, making sure to bring some of these cultural food practices into them, making sure they're included in them, and showing how healthy they are. The next point is acknowledge things and not appropriate. Make sure to give credit to where credit is due. If a recipe or a food came from a particular person or group, make sure you show credit to them. You can use the recipe, and you can talk about it, but just, again, give honor to where it comes from and not just say, hey, this is something that we made, knowing that, there are groups that have been doing this for hundreds, if not more years, right? So it's just a matter of showing respect. Using different herbs and spices to flavor foods. There's so many out there, and they taste really good, and they impact meals in so many different ways. So when we're thinking about, when we have our curricula and what recipes we want to include in our lessons, think about what kind of herbs and spices can we highlight, what kind of flavors can we, encourage, what kind of flavors can we have in our dishes that people will like. And there may be some people that may not like a certain flavor, but guess what? There might be a spice or herb that they do like and they never had before. So being able to, again, use these different herbs and spices in our lessons can make people like certain foods. There might be a certain food somebody didn't like because it was seasoned the wrong way or not seasoned at all. And so putting some of those different heritage herbs and spices in might make people like a certain food that they hadn't liked before. And then the next point is providing culturally appropriate education, messaging, and or materials. This is a really important part. People need to see themselves in the materials, not just the photos, but also, again, the foods, the stories, all these things. So when I talked about leaning on our community because they're subject matter experts, this is a great way to get them involved in this process. Asking them, when we're doing consults, asking them, what type of foods do you like? What type of foods do you prefer? What did you grow up eating? So asking these questions, getting them involved to help inform whatever it is we're doing. Of course, consider dietary restrictions because we need to conform to those because you can't eat a food that you're allergic to. It could kill you. And then the last point here is collaborate with your RDs. RDs are the nutrition experts, and they are trained and equipped to deal with a lot of these things. So really, if you're a physician, lean on your RDs. If you're an RD, tell your physicians to lean on you for that advice. And then next point here. The important part, because I know I'm short for time, the most important thing here is to listen and ask questions, all right? Listen to our patients, listen to our clients, and really ask the right questions. Ask them questions that speak to their relationship to food, and not just what do you eat, how do you eat, but really, what does food mean to you? Ask those more kind of like ethnographical questions. What is your background with food? Like, what did you grow up eating? Again, asking those important questions. Know why you're doing this. And again, we talked about why we should highlight foods common across cultures. And then the last part is, again, partnering with other people. You may not have all the answers yourself, okay? So, but you know what? You have enough people around you that do have the answers. So partnering with community health workers, partnering with chefs and culinarians, partnering with farmers. They're the ones that grow our food. We definitely need to be partnering with them, All right, and then also, we're in DC. We can't be in DC and talk about policy. So partnering with food policy advocates so we can also help, promote some of these healthy changes that we want our patients to have. A lot of that comes through policy. So we need all these people at the table to make this happen. And then if you want to teach or bring these Always programs to your community, there's a QR code there. You could talk to me afterwards. I'm more than happy to talk more about it. But I think that's pretty much it. These are learning objectives. Boom, boom. I want to end with, what? Oh, my bad. Sorry about that. All right, I think I see most phones down. Yeah, I see a couple more up. Okay, so I want to be respectful of time here because all right. Learning objectives. Last point I want to make here, this is from Michael Pollan. He says he's yet to hear of a traditional diet from any culture anywhere in the world that is not sustainably healthier than the standard American diet. So the more we honor these cultural food traditions and eating, the healthier we'll be. So with that, I thank you for your time.